We're still in the midst of exploring new entry-level custom-capable peripherals, and this time we're taking a look at the Aula F75, a $70 pre-built 75% that's continuing to push the boundaries for what you should expect from a sub-$100 keyboard in 2024. Aula did reach out to us for review and sent this sample over for us to take a look at today. No money changed hands, and all opinions expressed here remain my own. As always, chapters and testing methodology are listed down in the video's description, along with links to everything that you see here today. The layout isn't anything overly exciting as 75% boards go, with just a little bit of explosion between the arrow cluster and the right side of the spacebar nav keys. Apart from that, the raised top edge of the top case, the flip-out feet, it's all something we've largely seen before, just at a stupidly good price. Annoyingly, this LED in the blocker between Escape and F1 just does this at all times and won't shut off. You don't even have control over it. More on that later. First, the keycaps. At first glance, it could be argued that this colorway was an attempt to copy GMK Blue Samurai. I happen to have that set, so I mounted it on my Keychron V1 and set it side by side, and oh, yeah, I give this one a pass. The Aula keycaps have a blue that shifts far more red, the accent color is using more of an orangey yellow as opposed to gold, and even the black saturation is different than the GMK set. So while it could maybe be argued this was inspired by Blue Samurai, I think this is honestly fine. That said, the PBT keycaps feature clean double-shot legends and legend alignment, and no obvious warping of any of the stabilized keycaps. We have pre-lubed switches from TTC Crescent linears, or New Moon linears. Admittedly, I'm not sure which is the real name since I've seen them listed both ways. We can see the lube is basically only on the legs and the spring. This kinda blew my mind because otherwise this feels like an extremely smooth switch, but with more of a deep, dense, loud impact and a top out that's quite similar, just a touch more quiet, thanks to what I believe is a full palm housing and what is definitely a POC stem. Now let's take a listen to the board as it ships. Oh, the arrow sounds so good. The stock stabilizers were decent, though I did have to go and retune some of them as intermittent ticking developed after a rebuild of the board during our live stream. This resolved the issue, so I'd say the stock stabs can stick around. I should also mention there's a rotary knob for volume and lighting control, with small, smooth detent bumps that feel quite satisfying. It's also not part of the main PCB, which means there shouldn't be any issues with depressing this causing adjacent switches to pry loose over time. Now let's take the board apart to look at the rest of the parts. Here's where we encounter one of the biggest issues with the design. The two halves of the board are held together with clips, nothing entirely uncommon in this end of the pricing spectrum. But when trying to remove the PCB and plate assembly with the top case, you're going to want to be careful, as you first need to undo the ribbon cables from the daughter board and rotary knob, and the connector for the battery. For the rotary knob, I recommend removing it from the daughter board side for ease of reinstallation. From here, it gets fiddly, as the insert that houses the USB dongle when not in use wedges the plate and PCB assembly to the top case. To get around this, you first need to pull the switches, then let the PCB slide out, one of the advantages of not using standoffs. Then, you can remove the plate from the top case. Reassembly is ideally the reverse of this process. I was able to wiggle everything back in place with the switches pre-installed, but it was a pain in the butt to get it back together, and it felt like at times I might break something. So really your best bet is to at least keep the plate foam in the build so you can set the switches back in the plate without the need for a plate fork, since this case's rebuild process disallows the use of a fork, with the plate needing to be in the top case first. As a revision to the case design, I might actually recommend that they relocate the dongle storage point to sit flat in the bottom of the case, somewhere maybe next to one of the feet right here. This makes the board better serviceable by the end user and makes it more possible for us to open up a few more build options with this board. Alright, with those separated, we can take a look at the polycarb switch plate, where there's not really a whole lot to see. Though it is worth noting they're using the same kind of leaf spring gasket mount design Tiger Light was using, leading to a very nice total assembly bounce potential if you're willing to remove the case silicone. They are using their own silicone gasket implementation that sees both gaskets attached along the back side of the gasket mount, holding each other in place. I opted to rebuild this board the first time without the spacebar gaskets installed to create a more even sounding spacebar, though this is totally optional. Now for the stock acoustic treatments. Pour-on plate foam, PE foam, PTF plastic sheet, pour-on case foam, and a huge silicone insert that takes up quite a bit of room in the bottom of the case and adds quite a bit of heft to the board. We opted to rebuild without the silicone insert, PE, or PTF foams, leaving just the case foam and plate foam to account for the PCB's design and gasket mounting style, and provide maximum assembly bounce for the softest usable bottom mount. The PCB is another opportunity to improve. It's using north-facing hot swap sockets, though because we're using all long pole linears in today's content, this isn't an issue for cherry profile or similar. We also have per key flex cuts and a 1.2mm thickness. This really doesn't do anything but make the board less likely to sound decent without the use of foam or a tape mod. The battery is 4000 mAh, allowing for quite the wireless uptime when using Bluetooth, though I wouldn't recommend gaming with Bluetooth given the measly 125Hz polling rate as compared to the other modes offering at least 1000 Hz. You will, of course, get the best battery life by turning off the RGB lighting. Speaking of turning things on and off, there is sadly no QMK or VIA compatibility here. In fact, the board doesn't even have any software that's supplied from Aula. The only thing you get is a basic function layer that has pre-programmed macro functionality built into the board. So if you don't like what you see there, there's not really a whole lot you can do about it. And sadly, even what lighting control is afforded to the board doesn't allow you to turn off that stupid flashing light between the escape and F1. Why is that just a thing that I have no control over? Now, when we first rebuilt the board after the teardown, we decided to also try out DCX Emerald along with some KTT Vanilla Ice Cream linears, which is a full POC switch, and our foam modifications. Let's take a listen to what that all sounded like, as well as what the board sounds like with our foam modifications using the stock parts. I personally really like the sound of the modified keyboard. The switches and the keycaps are helping drive the sound a lot here in the absence of the rest of the foam, and really with the nice balance of foam and bounce we have in the assembly, it really is quite a nice typing experience either way. But with some of the challenges in disassembling this board, is it even really worth it to do in the first place? While this board is one of the nicer budget-sensitive boards we've taken a look at, it sadly came in after we got Rainy 75, a board that has set an entirely new benchmark for the lower end of the market. It's not that F75 is all bad. The plastic case is well built, the stock keycaps are nice enough, and it's got a good size battery for wireless use. The stock switches are really nice, the stock stabs only needed a slight bit of tuning myself, and they give you enough foam options with the board to let you either lean into a really foamy sound or go a different direction with different parts and still have a great sounding and feeling board. It's just a shame the board is so irritating to take apart and rebuild, and that it's missing functionality like the ability to remap any layers of the board, program macros, or even the ability to turn off that stupid flashing light in the top left blocker. Ultimately, this makes the F75 something of a simple, raw experience. It's probably best used in its out-of-box config, maybe swapping out the switches and keycaps when you get the funds for it. If you like what you see and are okay with that basically being all you get, then for the money this isn't terrible, and it also has really strong wireless battery life. But if Aula Gear could take a look at how they can introduce more quality of life to the overall design of the board and making the revisions we've laid out today, this would be an outstanding choice at its price point. Again, a huge thank you to Aula Gear for sending the F75 over for us to take a look at today. What are some other custom capable keyboards you'd like us to consider taking a look at? Be sure to leave us a comment below, hit that like button if you like what you saw, get subscribed and notified so you don't miss any of our content when it goes live, and be sure to follow us on Twitch and our socials. Links are in the video's description. And here's some more budget-sensitive keyboard content for you all to take a look at. Thanks for tuning in, take care of yourselves and one another, and we'll see you all next time.